Welcome to another episode of Talks with Tech Leaders. Today I'm delighted to be joined by Peter Bull, somebody who has always been a strong supporter of what we do here at Kudos and over the years with the Northeast.net meetup that we've run as well. You're a regular there.
Yeah.
I'd say one of the most regular attendees, and you've spoken quite a few times as well. So we've been meaning to do this for a little while, so it's great to finally get you on.
No, it's great to be here, absolutely. Yeah, so I'm Peter Bull, and I'm a senior software engineer at Klipboard. So basically work on their sort of web APIs and things like that. So anything .NET I'm always up for, but definitely enjoy that. But absolutely, it's been great to support the events. Always love coming along. Even if I'm not presenting, it's great to sort of come along and support them and write about them afterwards. But it's just a really good part of the Northeast community. We've got a lot of .NET developers, so an event like that is absolutely perfect, and I've been pleased to be involved with actually quite a lot.
Yeah, great. So were you born in the Northeast?
Yeah, I might not sound it. I've got this kind of weird accent. I don't know, it might come from where I grew up. So my parents came from Edinburgh. So my mum and dad, they were from Edinburgh, pretty much the same part of Edinburgh. But I grew up in West Monkshaven. So it's like a sort of just near Whitley Bay. And the accent's a bit milder there, so we didn't really have the strong Geordie accent you'd associate with the Northeast. It's more of a kind of Northumberland accent. In fact, Northumberland's not too far from me, so just at the top there. So it was just not really a strong accent, so I never picked it up. But I lived there for most of my life, and then I moved to Gateshead, so that's where I live at the moment. Yeah. But spent most of my time in West Monkshaven.
And then did you, growing up, did you go down the traditional route of school, college, university?
Yeah. So basically, in my area, we have like what's known as the 3-tier system. So you have like a first, middle, and high school. So you're changing schools a little bit more often, probably that you'd expect. It was luckily the first and middle school were pretty much the same building, just different halves. So that's where I started. So there was interesting because didn't really have many computers. Funnily enough, we had in my first school. I don't remember them having that many. I think they might have had like a couple of VIC-20s, I think maybe what we were using then, which was still quite old for the time. And then for middle school, which was basically just the other side of the wall, effectively, we had 4 computers for everyone. Oh. So that was when they were Amstrads. So we had 4 Amstrads, which we could use just for a little bit. So they didn't actually let you do schoolwork. Actually, you had to get permission to use the computer to hand in work, because they said, oh no, it's just for like research and stuff, but actually to actually use it for work, they weren't too keen on that. But I managed to talk them around, which was nice. But so that was a good experience. And then the high school was a bit further away, but again, just went there and sort of continued. My plan was to kind of actually not go into like computers specifically, but actually electronics. So my dad was an electrical engineer, and I loved electronics, loved playing about with components and stuff. I had these kind of kits you could buy where you could sort of connect them up, and just really enjoyed that. So I was really keen on that. I thought that'll be my path, following your dad's footsteps, as they say. So I go to high school. They were doing electronics a little bit anyway in my first year. So I was like, great. They had like an acid etching equipment, all the things you needed to make your own printed circuit boards. It was fantastic. I was like, this is great. Electronics, really want to get into this. So that's what I thought, that's what I'll do. So when I pick my GCSEs, that's what I thought I'll do. That'll be my main one. I'll do electronics, not IT, surprisingly enough. And turn up for my first day, and they're like, oh, sorry, we're not doing it anymore. I'm like, what? Yeah, we're not doing electronics anymore. I was like, well, what am I doing then? Where's all the stuff? You had all the equipment? Yeah, it's in the skip outside. Couldn't believe it. So instead, I had to do something called engineering skills. They said, don't worry, we've transferred you to this other GCSE, because I couldn't do IT because it was full up. So I was kind of stuck doing engineering skills instead, which is not what I wanted to do. And I was devastated. It kind of pushed me away from electronics because I had all of that passion to do it. But there was nowhere to direct it. We did get to play around with molten aluminium. I got to pour that one time because we were making stuff. That was fun. But it just kind of derailed my plans a little bit. But by the time I got to A-levels, I went back to the IT track. So I was probably the only person who took A-level IT who didn't do GCSE IT. So I kind of skipped a step. But that was great. So that got me back on track. and then through that did a couple of other A-levels and just got enough points to get into uni. I literally had one of my teachers phone me up and says, Peter, you'll never guess what, you've got enough points to get into uni. And she seemed worried, but I was like, why are you worried? This is great. And she was like, oh, because I was meant to be going for a HND. So a HND is like kind of like half a degree, if you like, at the time. And that's what I was aiming for. I'll do a HND just to build my skills up. But I got enough to get a degree. So I thought, well, why not go for it? So I'll end up doing a degree in computing. There was like 2 tracks. So in your first year, you were kind of all together, and then you'd split off into computing for business and computing for industry. Business was more databases and stuff. I thought, I don't want to be doing databases. So the other one was more hands-on. So it kind of led, not quite electronics, but more hands-on hardware, running code on things like VxWorks, which was this kind of real-time thing, and writing your own compiler. I just thought that's exciting for me. So that gave me some really low-level stuff to sort of get those fundamentals in. So I really, really enjoyed that. A lot of it was kind of starting to become a bit out of date, because as unis were kind of just like trying to teach you with what was available, they were kind of having to guess what was going on, and I think they kind of missed it a little bit. But I learned a lot there, and that was actually my first job, was during my degree. It was a sandwich degree, so 1 year you would do a placement. Now, normally you'd think, let's do a placement near where you live, maybe in Newcastle, maybe in Gateshead. But because I was like running down the clock, I kind of ran out of time, and I had to panic and think, I need to do a placement year. And they literally phoned me up and said, we found one for you, Peter. And I was like, okay, where is it? And it said, Bad Mergentheim. I was like, where's that? Germany. And I said, okay then. So I had a phone interview, and they said, you sound great. And I ended up working in Germany for my placement year. Oh, wow. So it wasn't quite the convenient place. Everyone else was working just on the road maybe, or even down south. And here I was working in the southern part of Germany, basically 2 hours from Frankfurt. So we were kind of in the middle of nowhere. But fantastic opportunity, really fast internet. It was the year 2000 at the time, and they had gigabit. Now we have that now in our house, but back then you didn't have it very often, because we were near what they call a fat pipe for Germany, and we had the best internet I've ever had, even probably to this day, because it was just a really good opportunity to dive into it at an earlier stage than normal, because I didn't expect to be my first IT job to be while I'm doing my degree, but definitely a lot. And then that sort of kickstarted my career from there. Yeah.
Did you not want to stay out in Germany then, or how was that experience like when you were there?
It was interesting, because it was a challenge, because I had chosen French GCSEs. So when I was choosing my GCSEs, I think I got them all wrong, didn't I? I didn't do IT, and I didn't do German, although I couldn't have known that. So I picked the wrong path briefly, but it was a good challenge. Luckily, everyone spoke great English, but I did want to learn. I thought we might as well make the effort. So I did take some classes, got me out of work, which is quite nice. So I took classes for about a few months, once a week. So every week I'd take German classes with a group of, fellow German learners who all mutually couldn't speak English except for me. So all of them spoke either Russian or another language, or German. So you definitely had to learn pretty quick. So that was good. But it wasn't something I would plan to do. If I just got, top tip, if you get a placement, get it sorted early. But I don't regret it. It definitely helped. And we did some fun stuff. It was quite a big company, so we had big meetups. They had a big party where they had literally everyone from all over the world. They had loads of offices all over the world, and they pretty much all turned up to this party. And we just had a great time. We had the VP of the company, everyone from everywhere, including the UK. But it was nice to I was kind of in the German contingent, because I was working in their office. But they just were this really big. I hadn't heard of them, but they do a lot of like plumbing supplies and stuff. They're like one of the biggest companies in Germany. Once someone told me that, oh, you do know the MD's like the 8th richest man in Germany? I was like, okay, this is a big company. But it was a great opportunity. It definitely pushed me. I was kind of stuck to my own sort of area at the time, and it kind of pushed me out the northeast, definitely, but definitely broadened my horizons. And then when I came back, it just I knew what the real world was like, and kind of made me want to do my own thing a lot more.
Yeah. Okay. And when did you land your first software job? And I guess I wanted to ask with that as well, when did you really get interest in software development? Was it from when you did your degree and it split off, or was it prior to that?
For software development, it came much earlier. It came as a hobby, when I was younger. Basically, when I was like, you got the classic story. I got myself a Commodore 64 for Christmas. I think it was for Christmas. It was from my parents, and it was the Terminator 2 Judgment Day edition. So, a bit of an AI angle there, and it was just this thing that you could just, you got BASIC, which was the programming language, and I played around with it for a bit. But my real sort of foray into it was actually a laptop that was being thrown away at my dad's work. So the railway were cleaning up all our old kit, and he brought this laptop home that he'd rescued just to kind of maybe mess about with himself. But I thought, hey, he put it in my room, so I thought, well, I'm going to have a look at this. So it was a Toshiba T1200, which was this really heavy laptop from, God knows, probably the late 80s, I think it was. And it was pretty good for the time. And I basically played around with that. So GW Basic was the basic I used there. And that was really good. So he actually had the manual. So I had the reference manual. So back in the day, before we had things like Copilot, and we had to read it in a book. So I had to basically flick. Luckily, it was spiral bound, so you could kind of flip through it and learn the language. So I wrote all sorts of little things, little applications, little games, all sorts of things. And I really enjoyed that. And it was just an opportunity to sort of really, I would always see what else can you do. I would start drawing lines. You can do lines, great. Let's do lines. You can do circles. And just did so much, and because it wasn't really in color because it was a black and white laptop. But I just really enjoyed the experience of playing around with this code. It did have some debugging facilities, but I never really figured out how they worked. So I just had to kind of muddle through it. You basically had 10, whatever, 20, go to whatever. There was that kind of thing. Same as the Commodore 64, but way more sophisticated. People actually were building like line of business apps with GW Basic back in the day. So it was a pretty. That's the railway, that's what they were using it for, that's why I had it. But that was my first foray. And then at school, they had like student licensing for Microsoft products. So I picked up Visual Studio. The very first version of Visual Studio in 1997 I got that on student licensing, and that's when I really started programming more recognizable stuff. So I got into VB through that, and just created my own stuff. And then about a year later, create my own website. So I thought, I need to learn this stuff, and the web was around, so didn't have to read books anymore. And I started up my own website and just posted what I was learning there. In fact, the very first line of VB code I wrote is actually screenshotted in one of my tutorials I wrote. I was just sharing these things and back then there weren't many programming websites in the UK. So, you had things like Yahoo, who didn't have the search engines we have now. They would basically have a list of sites, and if you went to the UK, there was like 8 of them, and mine was one. So it was pretty good. I got a lot of traffic, and it just meant I could share my learning experience, and it made me learn more. And that took me right through to the early 2000s with .NET. So when .NET first came out, I was like, this is brilliant. It actually came out when I was in Germany, and I ordered the alpha. So I actually had it in the year 2000, which was a good couple of years before it came out. And I just was like, this is it. This is clearly the future. It was not like it is now, but it was clearly, there's a lot of investment gone into this. And I basically followed the .NET journey right from the year 2000 to now. I was literally doing it today. So and we'll continue to, there's been many versions since. We're up to 10, but there was the .NET framework as well. But pretty much followed the .NET journey all the way through, and always done it as a hobby. It's always been like, also my hobby first, and I still do it in my spare time. Programming is a passion for me. It's a job. It's a great way to earn money because I get to do what I love, but in my spare time I do my own thing as well.
Yeah. And when was your first .NET job? Was it after university? Did you do any when you were in Germany? Or?
No, it just come out. So we were doing something called Java server pages. That was meant to be the next big thing. So there was a bit of a battle. It was PHP, which is obviously still around. WordPress uses it. But Java server pages were being pitched as the next big thing. And .NET came out just after. So I actually wrote a lot of stuff in JSP. And as soon as .NET came out, I was like, that just kind of wiped out that market completely. I mean, there might be the odd JSP page around, but my first .NET role was actually by sheer chance. I was looking for work, and out of uni, hoping to pick up a junior software development role, but they kind of didn't exist at the time. So every kind of job needed a couple of years experience. You needed maybe 2 or 3. I had 10, but as a hobby. So at the time, people were pretty strict. They were like, nah, it has to be in work. But I need the work to get the experience. It was that classic loop. But I had probably at least 4 times the experience of everyone else. But because it was as a hobby, it just didn't count. Nowadays, it did. If you got a good GitHub repo today, you can get yourself a job, no problem. But back then, no, it didn't count. So I really struggled to get a role. So I picked up a call center role just to get myself into the work environment. And that contract ended, so I was looking for different things, and a part-time role came up, a part-time programming role. I thought, well, why not? I didn't have too much experience still in a commercial sense, but I felt, well, what's the harm, I can turn up, and it was for classic ASP. So, luckily I've been doing VB for quite a few years. Classic ASP I'd done a little bit, but I knew it was very similar. It uses something called VB script, so it's very similar to, it's basically Visual Basic. So I was like, okay, let's give it a go. Turn up to the interview, and they're like, yeah, sounds like you know what you're talking about. CV-wise, doesn't really matter. I could talk the talk. And they were like, okay, great. So I get to join that company, and it's 4 of us. So there's the founder, 2 customer support agents, and a developer. Yeah, my first proper job other than the placement year, I'm the only dev. So literally, the original developer, she was there for a couple of months to do a handover, and then she left, and she said, don't worry, if you need any help, you can call on me. Never needed to. She did a great handover. So I basically was a solo dev in this part-time role, and so it was classic ASP, but obviously we knew that can't last. It was, if there was any kind of problems with the site, we wanted to expand it. The website was for buying and selling books online. So we were an online secondhand bookstore. In fact, he did it before Amazon was doing that. Amazon was selling new books, but nobody was selling secondhand books. So he actually beat Amazon to it. They actually did it just after he did. Not sure if that was a coincidence, but it was a great way to recycle books. You could send them to people. And my job that I decided to do was, let's change it to .NET. So my very first full website for .NET was that one. So we ported it in I ported it in 9 months. I sat down with my with the owner. We planned it out. So we basically spent a few months planning and a few months developing it. I had to actually go into the office and do that. I couldn't do it remotely, so I had to actually go into the office back then, even when it was cold weather and the snow was in. But we did it, and we shipped it. And just overnight, site expanded even more. We added more features and functionality. We added a forum, which cut down our customer support load, because many of them just wanted to resolve issues. My book hasn't turned up, but they could. This forum allowed them to do that, and the site just was starting to look after itself. I was starting to. We built in everything we wanted. There's only so many different things you can do, but we rebranded it. We refreshed the website. It just looked amazing. It was a really good project. Really enjoyed it. We had a great team, nice small team to work with. And as it was starting to wind down, I thought, okay, let's see what else is out there. And I'm doing a talk, not one of your events, I'm afraid, but it was before that, and it was. I just was talking about one of my projects. I'd done an app for Windows Phone, which was a mobile phone platform that Microsoft gave a go. Didn't quite work out. But somebody there was like, listened to my talk about it. He said, Peter, can you come and do our Windows Phone app? And I said, absolutely. I get paid to do this. So I took that job on part-time. So that was again a good opportunity. Windows Phone didn't quite pan out, but I was in the door, and eventually when the other job panned out, it it ended on a good note. It was just because the postage prices went up and it just wasn't viable. But took that job full time, and that was a full-time job in a team of developers this time and that was great. So I basically used that part-time job, gave me the experience I needed to get that next job. And once I was on that ladder, I've been able to climb it ever since, basically.
Because you've always had an interest in Windows apps and Windows phones, something that I've noticed across the years as well. What has that now still got a market, or has that now come to an end when it comes to like Windows apps?
It's a good question. So native Windows apps is an interesting one. That was always what I did as a hobby. So back in 98 when I was doing my website, those VB examples were Windows apps. So I've always done Windows apps. Certain platforms have come and go in between, but there's still a need to have some native apps. Native apps on mobile are obviously pretty common. So native apps on Windows still have a place. There are ways to do that. In .NET, you have something called .NET MAUI, so you can build an app that basically runs on Windows and iOS and Android. So that gives you the choice. But Microsoft have been quite interesting. They do lots of different platforms. They do something called Windows Forms, which was like the .NET original one. There's WPF, which is kind of like a more designer-led kind of system, which actually helped inform what we have today, which is called WinUI. So WinUI is like what a lot of the newest Windows apps are probably written in. So if you've got something like Microsoft Copilot, the app, that is a WinUI app. And that goes with something called Windows App SDK. And that's my current sort of hobby passion, is supporting that. So there's some that basically surfaces all the Windows 11 features. So anything that's in Windows 11 that you think, that looks cool, that's where that's coming from. So all the new stuff, like newer toolbars or newer styling, that's what WinUI is. And also there's things like Windows widgets as well, which are not as popular, admittedly. But again, those technologies. But yeah, there's still a place for Windows Native. But if you want to cast a wider net, then you have to obviously go for something like a web technology, maybe. Blazor is obviously a good option on the .NET side. But yeah, I think Windows Native still has a place. I still support it for my own work. And certainly if it ever came up at work, I would be able to do it. But yeah, mostly my work life is web APIs. But I think Windows Native still has a place. Windows Phone obviously doesn't. That didn't work out. But through Windows Phone, I got those other opportunities. So even though it didn't work out, I did. And it did open a lot of doors to a lot of opportunities because there weren't many Windows Phone developers. So it was kind of nice to be. And I got one of the first apps that launched. So when that device launched, I think back in the early 2010s, there was 1,000 apps on the store. Some would say not many more after that. But I had two of them. So I had two of the apps that launched. So when I bought my first Windows Phone, guess what the first thing I did was? Install my own app. Yeah. Of course. So I was at least one of those downloads. But it was pretty popular for that platform. Yeah. But I was pretty invested in it. But it didn't work out. But the experience it gave me definitely did work out.
Yeah, I remember when they came out because I worked at EE at the time. And that was a lot like early 2010s when there was like the iPhone, all the Android phones, like the HTC and Samsung and things like that. But then I think Nokia released was it a Lumia phone, and that was like a Windows operating system. So was it maybe for the like Nokias that ran the Windows system? Is that what you were developing apps for? Yeah,
because originally I got the HTC HT7. That was my HT7. That was my first phone. I literally rolled under the rollers of the O2 shop in Northumberland Street. Literally they opened it up, and I was probably the first one to buy it. I'm not sure, but there's a good chance I was probably the first person in the Northeast to get a Windows phone. But yeah, Nokia, because Nokia was an acquisition that Microsoft made mostly to ensure Nokia didn't do something else. So Nokia had their own operating system called Symbian, and that was basically what they used. And Microsoft was like, Nokia's hardware was excellent. They were like the top-notch hardware of smartphones. Apple, had, obviously they were in the space, but people still respected Nokia from back in the day when they were pretty much, if you had a phone, you had a Nokia. Yeah. Smartphones, they were kind of struggling with because I think they kind of, so taking them on was an opportunity for Microsoft to say, let's have premium hardware. And actually, they did produce the best hardware. Some of my later Windows phones were Nokias. I had the one with the really good camera. I remember I had a 50 megapixel camera on the back, which was pretty good for that. I think it was 50, but it was pretty high for a phone of that kind. But they put the effort in for the hardware and the marketing, but the buying of it was a different story because people were choosing either Android or iOS. So being a number 3, very hard. In fact, there was BlackBerry at the time as well. Yeah. So you had 4 ecosystems battling it out, and 2 of them have obviously dropped out. But Microsoft, like everyone, likes to give things a go. But they actually admitted later that they've pulled the plug too early. I know when the new CEO took over, Satya Nadella, he said his biggest regret as CEO was not stopping that from ending, because when it became Windows Mobile, they had it was pretty good. We had a lot of the features you have in phones now, wireless charging, always on displays, the ability to connect it to a dock and have a full screen desktop experience. Those were all available more than 10 years ago. You're only just getting those in Android devices and iPhones now, and it's like I had that on my phone as standard. So there was a lot of effort put in, and the development experience was excellent. They had a full-on emulator that was actually the Windows Phone operating system and Windows 10 Mobile as well. Development experience was obviously top-notch, exactly what you'd expect from Microsoft. So it was really easy. I did my own tutorials to teach other people how to do Windows Phone development, but it was very straightforward. I've kind of done. I played around with Android briefly, and I found it very difficult, very, very complicated, and just was like, how's this worse? How is this a worse experience than what I had 10 years ago? I know Windows Phone didn't work out, but I expect better of what we have today. And what we had back then was fantastic. Really, really good ecosystem. Very friendly. The rules were pretty flexible. If you wanted to have your own payment system, good for you. Microsoft wouldn't take a cut. They'd only take a cut of your app on the stores like we have now. But they'd take nothing if you used your own payment system, which certain platforms don't necessarily allow. So they were very flexible. They offered also, if your app sold a lot, they'd actually reduce their percentage cut. They did a lot to encourage apps to their platform, but there was a lot of blockers and problems. Google famously didn't support it. In fact, Microsoft developed their own YouTube app, and Google had it pulled. There was a lot of effort to bring. Everyone said my apps aren't there. Believe me, we tried. Many of developers like myself were encouraging people to do it, and many other developers were trying to bring those apps. Like Instagram was around then, so that was being tried. But just there was a lot of effort to kind of get in the way of that. Maybe it wouldn't have worked out anyway, but it certainly didn't help. When people said my apps aren't there, it was true. My apps were there. But they weren't the apps. They were apps that would take advantage of the platform and give people more options and things like that. But it was a shame to see it go. But I like the fact they regretted it. At least I always thought if they just wrote it off and said it was all a waste of time. But no, I still miss it. And obviously I couldn't come on without mentioning Windows Phone, because it was a massive impact on my career. It gave that job. Went on for years. I ended up working on their web platform, and we did some pretty innovative stuff. We worked on really, really cool stuff like content generation. We did content generation for generating assets we had like a platform where we could show content in venues, and I invented a static content generation system, and I co-invented one with my boss for video. So we basically could deliver broadcast video and professionally designed assets for venues. We were way ahead of our time. This is like what you have in Figma today was kind of what we were trying to do back then, but in 2012 when it was a lot harder. But we were really pushing the boundaries. It was just exciting. You could really innovate back then with .NET and do crazy stuff that actually brought desktop technology. So my desktop development technology expertise, I actually brought that into the web. So I mushed these two things together to produce that. So actually that desktop experience came in really handy, because I was able to say, hang on a minute, can you get these two things to work? And I did. And that became a core feature of our platform.
Yeah. And where did this thirst for knowledge come from? So one of the things we were discussing earlier, I said to you, was that whenever we do our meetups, if you're not presenting, you're always there with your laptop, you're always making notes, you're always writing blogs, and you attend a lot of the meetups and learning. I feel like there's something that you really enjoy doing. Where did that sort of originate from, and how do you feel that's helped you along your career as well?
I think it's always that thirst for knowledge. I always like to learn stuff. I'm like a trivia buff. I'm on the IMDb for movies, and and just like to know stuff. I just like to add to my knowledge. Every time someone says something, it's like, great. I'm always learning, even if it's not software. So even from when I was basically 11 years old, playing around with the Commodore 64 or my Toshiba T1200, I was always wanting to learn how to do it myself to begin with, because before I knew about the World Wide Web, it was kind of like you just had to learn on your own. So I was like, if only people could benefit from my knowledge, that would be great. If only that thing got invented, So when I discovered the web, I was like, this is the medium. Not only can I learn, and I learned a lot from other developers, I could share what I knew, and you could kind of bounce off each other. I'd see something someone did, and I'd be like, that's really clever. And I would take that and sort of, and integrate that into my way of doing things. I always like learning something, and it never stops. And even after all these years, I've been doing it like professionally for 26 years or so. I'm still learning, and it's just, I love to learn. I love to go to events and just find out about different things, find out what people are doing, different technologies. Even if it's not .NET, there's something. And the best way to kind of learn that is to write it down and sort of put it in my notes. And initially I would put it in my notes and I kind of file it away. And I thought, wait a second, there's all these notes I'm writing. Why don't I share them as well? So I just started doing that initially just on LinkedIn, and just thought, I had my own website, back in the 90s. Let's bring that back. So I resurrected my website and basically brought that back to life. And that's where I post now. So I've got my Rogue Planetoid website. That's my persona, basically in everything I do. And I publish articles of all the events I go to, the .NET meetups that Kasim, you host, and also the ones I do myself. Those ones I can cheat because I can write my bit first. But it's just great to share again my presentation in a different way, but also to just learn from others. I've seen so many speakers, and they've shown off something I've not used before, or they've talked about something that maybe I wouldn't necessarily use, but it's like, great, I know about that now. When someone mentions that, I know about it. And it's just an opportunity to learn, but just to share that with other people. I've always had that passion for sharing, and the web gave me that opportunity, and that's kind of the space I've been working in. But one of the things I've got planned is a course. I'm going to teach people .NET and C#. And you think, in this era of AI, is that really necessary? I'm thinking it is, because AI is a fantastic tool, use it all the time, but just knowing the fundamentals is handy. Just like it was back then with my GW Basic manual. I just want people to kind of have that sort of good foundation. AI the rest, fair enough. But just to give people that basic knowledge so they can grow more, because that's what helped me. That first line of code, hello world, grew to massive full-on applications. So I just want to give other people that same chance. It'll be just me and them talking, going through these examples live. Let's do it live, why not? And just a chance to share this knowledge, because in my head it's useful to me, but that's not enough for me. I want to share it with everyone else, because I'm not precious. I'm not one of those developers who'd be like, oh, I know this, I'm not going to tell you. I just the ability to share what I know, and that's rewarding as well. That's what motivates me more. I do my own packages to help other developers. I had a kind of mini obsession with SVG assets, so all the emoji you get in Windows, I've got that as a package, and various other things I put together from either open source assets just to remix them, or my own. Just a chance to kind of share these cool things I've learned. But through the events, not just the ones I've presented, but I've attended, I've just learned a lot. And the presenting is just an opportunity to give back. And I'm always there for you. Anytime there's a chance to present at the .NET Meetup, I'm there for it, definitely.
Yeah, no, I really appreciate it. Could you tell us a little bit about your journey to receiving an MVP from Microsoft?
Yeah. Microsoft MVP was awesome. It's one of those things that I knew about MVPs because I've met them. Many of them ran various events in the past. I've met them around the country and in this area as well. And I always knew about that, but I thought, I don't know what it takes, how much effort you have to put in. But I just was working hard. I was doing my blog posts on my website. I was doing my packages. I was presenting at events, of course. And someone who used to run some events back before yours just reached out to me and said, Peter, have you thought about becoming an MVP? I said, of course I have. But I don't really know what to do. He said, I'll nominate you. So that was Ben Lee, and he just said, oh, thank you very much, and he wrote me a wonderful nomination, and he's like, there's no guarantee that you get it, but once you get that, you still have to fill in all the things you do. So one of the things you're told to do is make a list of all the things you've done. So I've got this spreadsheet where I basically put in, did the .NET meetup with Kasim, great, that's one. Wrote a blog post about it as well, great, that counts. I get it twice there. Other events I've been to, my packages that I've done. So I've done the ones for for .NET generally. I've done ones for Blazor. I did a recent one for Blazor, which was really good. So all those things go on a list, but initially you submit them once I'd got up to that point. So I had about a year's worth of things, submitted those, and you just put in as much detail as possible, and then you wait, and you don't know how long it's going to be. You might get rejected, but within, I think, about a couple of months, I got the email saying congratulations, and I couldn't believe it. I spoke to Ben and said, oh, I got it. I said, oh, I'm so pleased. He says, I've nominated a few people and they've all got it. But I was so honored. I mean, God, it was like the amount of things that I've done over the years. Just it didn't, whether I got it or not wouldn't have made any difference. I still would have continued, but just to have that recognition from Microsoft, they know my name at the very least now. I was over the moon. And you got a glass trophy. I know it's actually crystal, and it was just to have that on my shelf at home. It sits on my shelf at home, and I just was so honored. And it opens up more opportunities. Hardly any I can talk about. Basically, you get a lot of interactions with the product teams. You can ask questions and get answers back about various things, but it's all under NDA. But once it's public, we can talk about it. So there's the Microsoft Build conference, for example. That's a big conference. We'll often get, a heads up about some of those things. Can tell you what they are this time, even if I wanted to. But it just is a chance for us to absorb that. So it gives me a really, really good heads up. And it means when it is made public, I'm already ready to go. Then I can share it. Then I can post about it. Oh, there's this thing that like when Visual Studio, the latest version of Visual Studio came out, I'd been using it for like a few months before, but couldn't say anything. And then when the NDA was lifted, it's like a relief. You can say, great, let's talk about it, because that was fantastic. Brilliant piece of work. I've obviously used it since the start. But just access to that kind of resource where you can try these things out and give them feedback, and that helps improve things. That means when I was recommending Visual Studio, the latest version, 2026, it was because I'd used it. It wasn't just because I was being told to. We're not told to say things. It's just we have that insight, we have that benefit, and then they said the hardest thing is getting renewed. Right, so that was the part that I was like, okay, it was coming up for my renewal, and I got it again. I did the same thing, just made a list of all the things I did, blog posts, the presentations I'd done. I'd done webinars as well. I did some events last year that I did a webinar for a big event in the Northeast where I taught people how to do a podcast AI. So they basically wrote an AI chatbot in Blazor. And that got picked as a workshop, and I did that and that went in. So everything I did went in there, and I got it again. And I went to an event just recently, and I spoke to a few people who were MVPs, and they said, yeah, it is really difficult. You should be doubly honored to be renewed, which I am. But it's a testament of my journey. But had I not got it, it would have made no difference. It feels like it's one of those things that was almost inevitable.
Yeah.
But just as a reward for the work I'd done, it was brilliant. And I there's never a day goes by where I'm not honored by it. It's on my presentations now, Microsoft MVP, and I've met other MVPs, and it's just a great community to be part of. But also to make sure everyone else is included. When I can share, I will. Yeah. And just to be able to inform and share, because I'm passionate about .NET development in particular. So it's like an ask me anything, I'll help you out. I've helped people with their interviews, getting jobs. I've helped colleagues skill up, and they've gone on to other roles which involved programming that might not have before. I've helped more people than I know, and that's great. That's what I want, really.
Yeah. Do you get like classification in terms of a speciality when you receive like an MVP and What's yours?
Yeah, you do. So I've got two.
Okay.
.NET and Windows development. Windows development was an interesting one. So often you'll get it for maybe one category. So there's different categories of MVP. So there'll be some for, say, Microsoft 365, for Azure and things like that. But for me, it's .NET and Windows development, which is perfect. .NET and Windows development, obviously my two passions.
Yeah.
So that reflects that. So you get specific access to those teams, the Windows team for Windows development, for example. So you get to ask them all sorts of cool questions, and it would be so great to go into some of the things we talk about, but you'll have to join us. If you ever join us, I'll see you in one of those chats. But it's just wonderful, it's such an amazing thing, because you used to stand up some meetings with your own developers. Imagine that with developers from Microsoft, right? That's the kind of access you get, and it's brilliant. Yeah. Fantastic.
And has it helped you with your work as well, in any way, when it comes to, like, you know, your current place of work or places you've worked before, having that access to Microsoft and having that network of fellow MVPs?
It's a good question. I mean, I've only been an MVP for the past couple of years, so it's really been in my last couple of jobs. It does seem. I think it is making a difference now. I know somebody at my current job said, "Oh, I can't believe we've got somebody like you who's a Microsoft MVP," and I'm like, "Wow." You know, we've actually got another MVP who works for Klipboard as well, and I actually knew him before, and I saw him post on LinkedIn. I was like, I didn't know you worked for us. So we've chatted a bit, and it's, you know, we could talk about stuff that we, you know, between us a little bit more easily. But yeah, it's just I think it's just a nice thing, especially in the Northeast. We don't have too many MVPs. I pretty much know them all personally. There used to be a lot more, but it just varies from time to time. If you want more, go and, you know, get yourself. I'll nominate you, or get yourself nominated. You know. It's if you're doing good in the community, it gets recognized, and a nomination is just the first stage of that. But I think it does. I think it, you know, if you're a company and you say you've got two MVPs working for you or more, you know, there's companies down. There's like Black Marble, for example. They run a lot of the big conferences like DDD North and that. Yeah. They have a lot of MVPs working for them, and I'm actually going to this year's one. I always go down there when I can. It's again a chance to meet developers from the rest of the country, but it's just, yeah, it's hopefully adds a lot of value. Obviously, a lot of those early insights I still can't share even with work. But yeah, it does give me the heads up that will hopefully help as I grow in my current job. I think it'll definitely make a difference.
Yeah. So we were discussing earlier how many years you've been in the software space. Yeah. And I want to speak about management. So I'll speak to a lot of software managers or CTOs, and just wanted to just curious to understand, have you ever thought about getting into management yourself, or has it been a part of your journey so far?
Yeah, it's a really good question, and I haven't, and it's because I just like software development. Every time I've seen a lead in the jobs I've been in, they don't do much coding, you know, and I think maybe in the future, but for now, I just like software development too much. I'm kind of like, I don't want to be away from coding. I see loads of people who've kind of took that career path, and they enjoy the work of management, but it takes them away from software development. And that's the only reason I'm not a manager now, I suspect. I think I would have gone for a lead role, and I think I will go for a lead role, but I just enjoy software development too much. If there's a lead role where I can do it, I'd go for it. But for me, software development has always been a passion from an early age, like I've said. But for management, it's just not for me yet. I might be getting on a little bit, but I think management is maybe for later. You know, I want to be hands-on. I want to, share my knowledge with my teammates. Want to learn more. I'm always learning, and I think being a manager would take me away from that. Yeah. Until I'm not too bothered about that, I think I'll stick with it. But yeah, that's why I focused on roles. Previous roles I've took deliberately where they've given me an opportunity to mentor. My last role before this one was come in as a mentor to mentor the developers, and I did. It was a great opportunity to come in with two really talented, a couple of talented developers. I worked in my team. We had more developers in the company broadly, and they were fantastic. There's like, what's to do, but it was mostly to sort of give them some insights they might not necessarily have got, how to sort of approaches, things you've done wrong. I've been there and done that. I'll help you avoid those issues. Sometimes you got to make your own mistakes, fair enough. but just to avoid the obvious ones, to just kind of give them a leg up. And that was a great opportunity. Unfortunately, there were some issues and I had to move on. But in my current role, again, it's just an opportunity to just kind of grow and sort of give something back. And as a senior software engineer, I'm enjoying it. That's the kind of role I'll stick with. But if in 10 years' time, I'm like, yeah, maybe. But for now, I'm doing it on my own. I'm doing it at work. And I think I'll continue to do that for quite some time.
Yeah. So you mentioned earlier how you got into software development. Do you see any paths, or can you give any guidance to anybody who is maybe looking into the Microsoft ecosystem, or maybe at college, university? Do you have any tips in terms of where they could start looking, especially obviously with you mentioning AI as well, and maybe getting those foundations in? Obviously, I appreciate you're probably wanting to put something together yourself, but is there any guidance you could give to somebody in that position?
Yeah, I think the best thing to do is do things on your own time, definitely. Because when I was doing that, even when I was in my jobs, when I was working in that call center job, I was still programming in my spare time. So even though every day I'm not using those skills, when I got home, I was writing code, building stuff. So I think that's the best way. Get yourself a GitHub account and start building code and posting it, because that's your CV now. I can imagine many a company is going to take you on board. If me of the past was now, I would have been fine, because all of the experience I had would have counted for something, because I could have had my GitHub repo, here's all this code, and they would have went, wow, this is great, no problem. That's what you have today. So I think my main recommendation is just try a few things. Obviously we've got AI to help you out. You've got things like GitHub Copilot and that. Definitely worth understanding those. That's going to give you a heads up, because a lot of people are using AI to build software, which is great, but you still got to understand what's going on. You still got to understand what it's doing, because if it isn't doing quite what you want, even if you need to tell it what to do right, you have to understand what it's done in the first place. So you still need these fundamentals. So the basics, yeah. Obviously, I've got things like my course. I've done my tutorials and workshops as well, which are freely available. But little examples, that's what I did. I started small. Hello World is the obvious one, but build from there. Play around with things. Every time I did a tutorial, it was because I wanted to try something new. So that's if you just play around with something. Maybe there's something in .NET. Maybe you've never done Blazor before. Let's knock up a Blazor site. I've not, at least with Copilot, I can get you most of the way now, and see what you can do. The best thing to do, because the tools are free now. Back when I was learning it, I had to buy these things. I had to go, and get a student license, and it was, it was quite expensive. It was like £250 in 1997. That's like a lot of money now. It's about 2 or 3 times that now. But for now, for free, you can get the latest .NET, the latest Visual Studio, the same tools I use at work, and build pretty much the same kind of software. And you can then check that in, and then when you're going for a job, that's going to show a real good understanding. AI is going to help you a lot. Of course it is. But so did IntelliSense when that came out. So did, all the other things that we've had in the software development lifecycle. But just starting small, try a few things, push yourself. Maybe you've never done mobile development. Let's do a .NET MAUI application. Maybe I'll do a Windows thing. Of course, yeah, we could certainly do with more Windows native devs, but it might allow you to play around with a few things easily and then go back to something else. But just start small and find examples. That's what I did. I looked at examples, recreated them, played about with them. What happens if I change this? What happens if I change that? What does it do? Can I break it? And with prompting and AI, it's the same thing. What can I do to get the results I want? If I ask it to do this, what will happen? If I change it and ask it to do this, it's the same cycle. And I think that's the best way. No matter what you're learning in your university or whatever, learn that. Because even if you're learning, say, the latest .NET, say you've got .NET 10, say you're learning that right now in school or in college, you're like, well, it's not going to be .NET 10 in a few years' time, but it'll be whatever, .NET 13, 14. But someone's probably still using 10 by then. Or you'll at least progress through to those versions anyway. So it's still relevant, even if AI totally takes over. There's all this .NET legacy code that's got to be looked after. So there'll always be a demand for some .NET work. And that's great because it continues the legacy. Because when I do move up the chain, and there's got to be developers who come up, and I want to support them, and I want to make sure they have the tools that they need And because everything's free, there's nothing stopping you. Back then, I had to pay for it, and it was worth it. But now, you don't. So give it a go. Start with small, grow, play around, and share it too. Because guess what will happen? Other people will learn from you. And what's better than learning than inspiring someone else to learn, I think.
Yeah. Do you think there could be a danger coming up where companies may think we can get AI to do everything, and then they may lack developers with those fundamentals that could then get them out of a position where things break and maybe not understanding why they're breaking?
It's a good question. Yeah, that's starting to become increasingly a fear, isn't it? Because you can almost vibe up an application now.
Yeah.
And if it's self-contained and small enough and you leave it alone, it's fine. But if it needs any work done at home, what's going on inside there? Any experienced developer is going to really not understand what's happening potentially, because they're going to look at that code and maybe it's done it all weird, or maybe it's done it the best way ever. But without that development experience, there's a potential risk there. That's why having the fundamental knowledge, AI is definitely great. I mean, it's sped up my software development. We use GitHub Copilot in our team pretty much all the time. Many members of my team, we hit the limits. We hit 100% at the end of the month, of usage. And, I'm making use of it every single day. Almost every hour of every day, I'm using GitHub Copilot in some manner. But I'm still understanding what it's doing. And I think that's the point. It's like, nothing wrong with using AI. As a company, if you want to employ AI, go at it. But you need to still have people there who understand what it's doing at some level. Because when it does go wrong, or something goes awry, or that prompt just doesn't quite do what you want, that's where someone has to go in and do it for you. And having that understanding, because at the end of the day, if someone asks you, what does this application do? And how does it work? And if you can't answer that question, that might not necessarily be a problem, but say in a regulated industry, or something else, or whatever, it's like that's the only way it becomes a problem. It's the caution is you need someone with experience. There could be many people. Maybe someone knows this bit of the application, maybe someone knows that bit. You don't expect someone to know everything. That's fair enough. But I think having some expertise of a code base isn't still necessary. I think it'll still be necessary for a long time. If you can trust AI enough to build everything for you flawlessly, then things may be changing. But that would still require people to understand how to do that. Even if you don't need to understand code anymore, you'll still need to understand how to produce the relevant output. Code is just the medium by which developers produce output. Doesn't mean it can't be English. Doesn't have to be C#, does it? But that mindset, that creative problem solving, knowing about all that's still important. So the developer skills you have now will still be relevant, even if AI takes over, because you have to understand it. Because in order to get the out, because it's like anyone, nobody really knows what they want. It's the classic product thing. People ask for something, but what they want is something different. Now, if you ask for something about AI, it doesn't know that. It tries to please you with the output, and the developer knows, I actually understand you. And maybe you still prompt it yourself, but your job is to translate what you're hearing to what you actually know they want. And that is still something that will be a skill. Even if it's not a coding skill, I think that'll still be a skill. Developers will have a place. It's just the language that we're using may change, but that thought process, that'll still apply. So we still need people who understand the fundamentals. The fundamentals might just be, how do I prompt this into working? It's a combination at the moment, but it'll still be that skill set, I think.
Is there anything that you're quite excited about that you can obviously share with like the Microsoft ecosystem?
I think .NET's really just hitting its strides at the moment. It's kind of had a reputation. Let's put it out there. So .NET always had a legacy reputation. There's probably many a startup who are like, we won't touch it because it's Microsoft. It's quite funny. You'll often hear about people who say, I won't touch .NET with a barge pole, and then they'll load up Visual Studio Code and start writing in TypeScript, which are both Microsoft products, right? So you get that kind of ironic disconnect. But for .NET, it's like, I think it's reached that point where there isn't any reason not to use it. There used to be. It's only Windows. It's proprietary. It's Microsoft only. Nobody else is adopting this. Nobody else is using that. That's not true. Now you've got companies like there's Uno platform. That's a .NET based ecosystem that can run applications cross-platform. It's not a Microsoft product. You've got Avalonia, which is a very similar thing. You've got OpenSilver, which is a Silverlight. So if you're a Silverlight dev, which is pre-Windows Phone, guess what? You can resurrect all your stuff. There's all these companies who are adopting .NET. Unity, the game development platform, that uses .NET to some extent. So .NET has reached this point where it's kind of like dismissing it out of hand is illogical. Yeah, back in the day, of course. Yeah, it's Windows only. Dismiss it. Now, it feels like it's the .NET I always wanted it to be. When .NET 1 came out, but when I had the alpha version back in the year 2000, I was like, this is a game changer. This is something, and it was way primitive compared to what we have now. But just that potential, this ecosystem that Microsoft was willing to bet on, and you've got 26 years later, it's still around. It's open source now. The tooling is pretty much free. It is everything about it. It screams out, use me, but it still has Microsoft attached to it, and that kind of puts people off. But you've got Blazor, which came out of a pet project that one of their developers did on a weekend. He basically, let's see if I can run WebAssembly and run .NET, like Mono as it was at the time, in the browser. Why not? Let's give that a go. That's now a core product in the .NET ecosystem. Blazor is literally the front-end web technology for .NET now. It was crazy to think that before that it was ASP.NET MVC and web forms even back in the day. These kind of clunky ways of doing things. Now we've got Blazor, which is pretty clean, very similar to other frameworks. Really mature, really awesome. Used it myself, got my own toolkit, which was actually AI-driven. I ported a Windows toolkit that I wrote to Blazor using AI, and I was amazed at the capabilities of Blazor. Even I, who've now been using Blazor for quite some time, wasn't fully aware of what you could actually pull off. And I was actually surprised that many of the components that I included worked in that way. I thought you can't do that without JavaScript, surely. But no, worked fine. So yeah, the main thing about .NET now is it's kind of, if it was called anything else and it was from anyone else, it would be way more popular than it is. It's not deficient in any way. It blows most other platforms away on performance, but it has a reputation, and that's kind of hard to overcome. But people like myself try to push that. I've got a pro Microsoft agenda, of course, but why not? You come with me with a good reason not to use it, that's fine. But .NET as it exists today is like, if you're not considering, at least give it a go. But if you're just going, nah, don't want to use it, that's crazy, because it just, all the companies I've worked for, we've delivered massive value out of using .NET. I mean, the Northeast is quite interesting because we have a lot, you'll know it yourself, we have a lot of companies using .NET, kind of in secret, almost. There's so many companies in the Northeast, well-known companies, who use .NET, and you would never know it because they don't shout about it. They don't go, we use .NET, but they do. So many companies, household names, and companies that I've worked for, all using .NET, and with talented .NET developers working for them, but you wouldn't know it because nobody really talks about it except yourself. We sort of showcase what the Northeast is all about because the talent is here. We have a lot of talent, and around the world as well. That's why there's many of MVP around the world, because people like the Microsoft ecosystem. There's been various things here and there, but generally, there's a lot more positive now, and and that's what my job is, to talk about it.
Yeah. What are your sort of plans looking forward in your career, maybe in your personal life? Is there anything that you'd really like to achieve through work or outside of work?
I think growing my sort of doing more things, like more presentations, bigger events. I really enjoy the kind of meetups that I do and continue want to do that. But the big conferences are getting very tempting. I would like to do something like that. I see many a person grow from meetup to larger events to a big conference. I would really enjoy. Being an MVP can kind of open these sort of doors up, but I'm definitely aiming higher now. I think I've got to the point where I can do a good presentation now. It takes me about a month to put a presentation together because I really put the work into the slides and the cadence of it all and the demo. I did a particularly long demo in my last one. That was the longest one I've ever done. which involved showing every single UI technology there is in .NET, which I thought initially was a crazy idea, but the more I thought about it, the more I thought, let's do it. So it's like, I want to kind of push myself. I did a conference recently where I was on stage where we hosted a panel. In fact, it became an episode of my podcast. So that was kind of my first foray into that kind of thing. I've done, obviously, talks at like smaller events, but I was thinking, that's what I want to do. So personally, definitely want to push myself, do these bigger conferences, because I see these guys, these people. I've seen many people that I've seen someone where she did a really great talk at an event I was at, and then she was doing like NDC like a few months later. I was like, that's amazing, just to see these people grow, and you have these, they're known names, they're rock star developers, and I hope I can be at least amongst them, maybe in the lower tiers, but I definitely want to do that. So, and do more of my own projects, do my course, just share my skills more, do more tutorials. I definitely want to pick up, so do some more tutorials. Professionally, just kind of grow in that as well. The company I'm in at the moment is really forward looking. It's sort of an older company with a kind of legacy heritage, but a really forward looking focus. They actually originally started like 1963 as like a bicycle repair shop. You just think, and they do now like ERP solutions for various companies. Basically, a lot of like car dealerships and car places where you get your tires are probably using our software, right? But we're also investing a lot in AI as well. We might have this legacy, but that doesn't mean we aren't looking forward. So there's a lot of push to build AI into our products. I'm not sure how many things I can say, but many of our products will have AI in them, and we're also enhancing the developer experience with our own AI projects as well, just to make using our products internally a lot easier. A lot of interactions we build out services, for example, that our other products use, so those kind of require like some onboarding and stuff, so we want to build some kind of things in for that. So basically, but in both like professional and personal, it's definitely seeing where things are going. In AI especially the Northeast, we have a massive potential. They're building a new AI data center pretty much up from where I work. For OpenAI. I mean, OpenAI literally mentioned the business park where I work as one of the places. One of the only places they named was a place in the Northeast, and I couldn't believe it. I thought, we are on the map. What Klipboard's doing is really interesting. We're kind of building in this kind of new functionality to allow our customers to have the benefits of AI, just like they would with any other product. Basically, if you're not building AI into your products, someone else is gonna. It's like, and of course, people are going to start choosing a product. If I can just talk to it, if I can just type in what I want, why would I use this other product? So we're kind of building in that functionality. And as developers, we're using GitHub Copilot, as I said, every day. It is, we think 40% of accelerated development. We basically, any time we spent, we're getting 40% more out of that than we would have without it. In the past 6 months, it's basically given me a year's worth of development time instead. It's like, it's amazing, and the potential there is just going to grow. We use a variety of different models for different purposes, and we also are training our own model because we have our own proprietary programming language. So some of our legacy products have a proprietary cross-platform language, and there are no examples of this online. You can't just look up online or ask GitHub Copilot, can you help me with this code, because it doesn't know about it. So that's been an interesting challenge. So just all these kind of things just to kind of accelerate our development. It isn't designed to replace anyone. It merely frees us up. The amount of things I can spend my time on has increased because of AI, because I can do other things that I wouldn't have been able to do otherwise. But yeah, it's basically onwards and upwards, and building out and more events, of course, writing about them, talking about them on my own podcast as well, just kind of raising awareness of what's going on here, because everywhere is exciting at the moment with AI, of course it is, but to have my home region to be almost at the forefront of that is something I would hope and dream and wish. But the fact it's a reality is brilliant, and so definitely more of that.
I'm always thankful for your support, Peter, and really appreciate you making the trip down, and it's been great to know more about your journey. Obviously we've known each other for years, but I think today has been great to learn more about you and the steps you took to get to where you are now, and your future plans. Clipboard and with the event sound exciting as well. So yeah, thanks again.
Yeah, it's been absolutely great. Really enjoyed it. It's been fantastic to go through my journey, and hopefully I'll see many more people following my footsteps. And I'm happy to encourage people, following in sort of my route has been great. And hopefully I'll encourage a few more to join me on that programming journey.
No, I'm sure you will.
Thank you.